All right, this is the craziest thing I've ever done on behalf of a brand. I'm about to submerge myself into this freezing river. It is -6 Celsius, that's 20 Fahrenheit. It's very cold. I'm cold now. I don't know if I'm just cold because I'm thinking about what I'm about to do or just because I'm really just cold. But I was sitting at my desk writing this article about how WeatherWool reacts with water, and I realized that despite being a long-time supporter of WeatherWool and putting it through a lot of testing since 2017, I've never actually fully submerged myself in water. And my reputation is my greatest asset. I work for WeatherWool, but I also work on behalf of other brands. And so my trust that I have with you, the audience, is my greatest asset. And so I don't want to do anything that will jeopardize that. And as I'm reading these facts about WeatherWool and how it reacts to water, I'm almost having a hard time believing it myself. One in particular was that when the wool gets wet, it actually generates heat. And we're gonna get more into that later if this all turns out to be true. But first I just wanted to put it to the test, experience it for myself so that I know I'm not talking BS and can speak on behalf of experience rather than facts that I read on the internet. So yeah, without further ado, I suppose we should get wet. I guess I should tell you what I'm wearing. I've got the WeatherWool ANORAK on, and underneath that I've got the CPO shirt. So I've just got 2 layers of full weight WeatherWool up my upper body, and my lower body I've got some Wool Power long johns and then these canvas pants, wax canvas pants. Certainly the weakest link in my armor is my pants. WeatherWool does make pants, or they have in the past. I haven't got any yet, unfortunately, or they would be exactly what I'd be wearing in this case. But let's say hypothetically you're fishing, you're on a hike, whatever happens, you fall into cold water. What can you expect? You know, a lot of information is going to tell you that you need to quickly get off your wet clothes and get on dry clothes, or that you need to get a fire going or find shelter. And what WeatherWool is saying is that you do nothing. You just keep moving, keep active, and go about your day, and the WeatherWool will keep you warm and it'll dry itself, which is really great news if it turns out to be true. So we're gonna put that to the test. I'm gonna get wet and see how I manage out here in freezing temperatures. Okay, here we go. Wish me luck. Did I mention I'm already cold? Let's hope this idea that wool generates heat when it gets wet is true, because I certainly don't want to be any colder. Okay, I'm cold, but I'm okay. So went for a little dunk. Suppose I should stay on camera and talk a little while so it doesn't look like I cut away to a different scenario. I was planning to lay under there longer, but it was cold. But, okay, my feet are wet, my legs are cold. My upper body is not bad. My hands are cold. My hands are also wool, but not WeatherWool. That's really interesting. My hands are much, much colder than where the WeatherWool's touching me. I wish I'd got my front wetter, but I think I got pretty well submerged in the back, and that should be enough to test me. And I did get water down my neck. As soon as I went down, I felt the water just go right through my neckline, right along on the back, so I'm soaked on the inside. But I'm actually okay. I'm gonna go start the stopwatch and see how this progresses. Let's look at that replay again, because when I looked down at myself, I thought that I maybe just didn't fully submerge myself in the water. But when I look at that replay, I realized that the water absolutely flows right over top of the front of my anorak. Where there was less pressure, the water seemed to flow right over and drip right off. On my shoulders and back, where there was more force, the water seemed to work its way into the wool a little bit deeper. Now, that's not a detrimental aspect, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, but I thought it was just worth pointing out that even though I was fully submerged, the front of the ANORAK came out of the water practically dry. Stopwatch, start. I have got myself some mitts on. My wool gloves I was wearing were not part of the test, although interesting enough to know that they were also wool and they were super cold. But I'm okay. It might actually be true that wool generates heat. I'm certainly no colder than I was before I went in the river. That alone is astonishing. But there's a chance, like where the wool is touching my back, that I'm warmer now than I was before I went in. And I don't even know if my toque got wet, but my head feels fine. So, I'm just going to now go about my day as if I had an accident, and I'm just going to go about my day like WeatherWool says. You can just go about. So I'm going to go make a fire and just proceed. I'm not going to change my clothes. I'm not going to find shelter. I am going to make a fire just to keep my body active and to do something, but not for the sake of staying warm, just to more or less to give myself something to do and to run some B-roll while I tell you about the facts of WeatherWool. What I'm going to tell you in this video is going to be hard to believe. That is why I went out into that river to test it myself, because I was having a hard time understanding and believing this myself. But I want to start with a quote here from some research from Dr. Jeff Naylor. He said, "When wool is sprayed with water, it will release enough heat to cause the temperature to rise as much as 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. That's a lot of heat. And I was struggling to believe that. But when I look at those words very carefully, the key word is when wool is dry. So what he's talking about is when wool has been completely dried, I think probably in some kind of a kiln or something situation that takes all the moisture out of the wool, and then it is sprayed with water. That biggest range of change, the chemical reaction that happens there that generates the heat, is from completely dry to wet. But what is that really going to mean on a day when we're out in the forest, there's already some humidity in the air, or maybe it's rain, humidity is very high? Are we going to actually notice that change? And so that's really what I want to put to the test and kind of combine the research with real life situations. Before we get into too much science here, let's go back to see how I'm doing on my actual experiment day. Okay, I've got some water from the river in an ice cube tray, and I'm going to see if I can get that to freeze, just to kind of get an idea of how cold it really is up here. I certainly feel my legs stiffening. Not my legs, but my pants themselves are freezing up. The canvas is getting hard and more difficult to move. But my upper body, where the WeatherWool is touching, is honestly really good. Really good. I feel really not much colder than before I went in. It has been, let's see here, it's been 20 minutes, 25 seconds since I started this stopwatch after I got out of the river, and there's no sense of emergency. Shortly after getting out, I felt relatively okay. I do feel moisture. I feel wet against my skin, but it's warm wet, not a warm wet. It's not unpleasant, I guess is the best way to put it. What I have definitely learned is that WeatherWool really needs to prioritize getting their wool pants and some wool mitts, because without dry mitts, my hands would be freezing, and my legs are freezing. Even though I do have some wool long johns on, it's not doing the job. There's no comparison between the long johns I'm wearing that are wool and the WeatherWool that I have on my upper body. And so certainly wool pants are something that you're going to want to get if you are planning to be in a situation where it might actually be a survival situation in cold water condition. When I watch the playback, I kind of regret not being in the water longer. But when you go under, man, it is a sense of panic. And I didn't know if I was going to be okay, so I got out of there as quick as I could. In hindsight, I probably could have stayed longer. I could have rolled over on my stomach, but you don't know when you're in that moment and you feel that rush of cold water just wash over you. It is terrifying. And so I actually think it's probably a really good idea to have done this, or for other people to do this in a controlled environment. My Jeep is not far. I can go in there, turn the heater on. I got dry clothes in my bag, so if this didn't work out in my favor, I have a backup plan. But I'm feeling okay, and I know now if I were to fall into freezing cold water in a serious survival situation, that I wouldn't panic as much because I have confidence in what I'm wearing and knowing how to dress for these situations. So, probably something that you should test yourself if you actually plan on being in this kind of a situation. Or you can take my word for it. But honestly, I wouldn't lie to you. There's nothing else I'd rather be wearing right now after dunking in a river than 2 layers of full weight WeatherWool. That's the truth. Ralph, the owner of WeatherWool, and I have had these conversations for hours. We've been talking about wool's reaction to water and water vapor and sweat and humidity and all the other things like fire and wind and dirt and all those other things. So we're going to talk about a lot of that in other videos. But we've both done our own research, and we've both done the test. Ralph, the owner of WeatherWool, has also submerged himself into a cold river, and he's experimented with how he feels over the time after coming out. And you can see that video. That was the original video and really what inspired me to do it myself. And we both, despite all of the time we've spent trying to learn about this and the experiments we've done, we cannot claim to be experts. There's still so much in the science that we don't understand, that we're still trying to figure out. But I'm just going to try to do the best that I can to explain my experience and some of the things that I do understand according to the research. So in this research from Dr. Jeff Naylor, there's some pretty technical terms, some of which I don't understand. So I'm doing my best to simplify this, but if you're someone who's interested in the science, I will put the link to this research below. It's on a website called woolwise.com, and like I said, you can find that link in the description. But here's kind of some of the stuff that I wanted to share that I think is important. Wool is regarded as active fiber. It's able to absorb and desorb moisture vapor as conditions around it change. This process is a form of equilibrium reaction. In other words, wool is going to balance conditions in both temperatures and humidity. Let's just take it back a little bit and go to some of the principles. Woolen fibers will repel liquid to an extent. This is the WeatherWool's first line of defense. So when the rain starts to fall, the water will just kind of pour right off. And that's just due to some of the principles of wool and the scale system that it has to it. It naturally wants to repel water. But eventually, water vapor will start to work its way backwards in through those scales and into the fibers. And that is the moment when the reaction starts to happen that creates heat. Water molecules are polar, having both a positive and negative side. Once inside the wool fiber, the poles of the water molecules form new bonds with the wool. And the creation of new bonds releases small amounts of heat. Personally, I'm not sure that I could really feel the heat being generated. It's not like you wrap yourself in an electric blanket and you flipped a switch and all of a sudden it's getting warmer. The heat is produced gradually. But I will say that something magical is happening, because I was as warm or warmer after I got out of a freezing river than when I went in. So I will state the claim that something is definitely happening there. And I do believe the research after my experience. Whether I could really feel that wool heating up, no. But something's going on there. I promise you that. I want to be clear that we're really going to just focus on the reaction of wool and water in this video, but there's so much more that we're going to talk about in other videos about the insulating factors and how when you take a WeatherWool garment from indoors to outdoors, that it also starts generating heat. But we're going to save that for another video. Let's get back to how I'm progressing on my cold, wet day. So the point here is just keeping active. You know, if you just sit there and shiver, you're gonna be cold. You keep your body moving, you keep generating heat, keep airflow moving through your body, and it's gonna help the wool dry out. And we're gonna make a fire, and hopefully that'll help dry out my pants and my feet, unthaw them. You can tell it's very cold when the wood splits that easily. You know, when wood freezes, it's like it has moisture in it, right? So it's like ice, and so it splits like ice. If it was warm out, that moisture would have more flexibility in the wood. It'd be more likely to bend and stretch rather than just snap. So at this point, my upper body, I'm fine. If I didn't, you know, if I didn't know that I just went for a swim and dunked myself in the lake or in the river, I would be totally fine. My legs, though, and my feet are cold. So cold, in fact, that I question if I should stay out here. To be honest with you, but I'm going to keep going a little longer. Now, the research says that wool can absorb water without feeling wet, and this is true to an extent. I did feel wet, but it was a warm, comfortable dampness. It's not the same as when you're wearing a cotton t-shirt and it's wet and it sticks to your skin. There's what wool does is it actually pulls some of that moisture off of your skin and it holds it in the wool, and yet there's fibers that are kind of giving a little bit of airspace between your skin and the garment, and so you have a natural airflow that's starting to happen between your skin and the wool, which helps it dry and helps you not feel as wet. Okay, so that was it's been 30 minutes since I got out of the river, and I'm fine. So time is no longer in question. No big deal. We can outdo time. So I'm not sure what my back looks like, but when I got out, you could tell it was completely soaked. I got a feeling that it's starting to dry from the top down. My shoulders are starting to feel drier than the lower parts of my ANORAK, and my sleeves, and certainly the same is true for my shirt. I feel drier on the upper half. I feel like that moisture's working its way down to the bottom of the garment. So while I make the fire, I just want to talk about a few more points. Is wool waterproof? That's a question that comes up all the time. And the answer is no. Wool is not waterproof. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around, the idea of choosing WeatherWool as your raincoat, and yet we say it's not waterproof. You know, why would you want a raincoat that isn't waterproof? Wool absorbs water eventually, but wool is also naturally water repellent to an extent. This is because the surface of the wool has a very thin, waxy, lipid coating, chemically bonded to the surface. That helps the wool fibers shed water. This means that water droplets touch lightly on the surface of the wool, and then they will bead up and they will roll off before absorbing into the fabric. The secret lies in the napping. Napping is a physical process, somewhat like brushing, that makes the surface of the fiber fuzzy. We use a directional nap to help conduct water downward off your garment. So choosing WeatherWool as a raincoat might not seem obvious, but it could be the best choice depending on the situation and what activities you're doing. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has put on a synthetic raincoat and then just after a little bit of activity starts to feel all clammy inside. Your body is always putting out moisture, but most synthetic raincoats are solid and they don't allow that moisture to evaporate. So that's really the amazing thing about the WeatherWool items, is that it can be shedding water on the outside while still absorbing humidity on the inside of the coat and pulling that moisture off your skin through the garment and then evaporating it into the air. Actually, I have a lighter in my pocket that I put in there before I went in the water. Oh wow. That's a good sign. I just wanted to see if the WeatherWool would hold it out in a quick dunk, if the lighter would still work, but let's assume it doesn't. And we'll use the ferro rod just in case, or just for the sake of example, I should say. Okay, let's get some of this here. I've spent countless days working in the woods or building my cabin where there is light rainfall, and despite building up a lot of body heat, I never feel any sweat or moisture inside the garment. And even though it's been drizzling and raining, usually by the end of the day or by the time I drive home, my garment's already dry. It's those days that made me realize that WeatherWool is really something special. It's remarkable to spend your day out in drizzling rain and just be working away in your WeatherWool and feel completely comfortable. You never have to worry about feeling cold or wet or anything. You don't really think about your clothing until you get home and hang it up and think that was the right choice to wear this day. Or you notice it when you start to wear something else. Some days I'm doing an activity or I'm doing a job and I just grab another, a regular Carhartt coat with quilted lining and a canvas outside, and I notice that I'm constantly taking it on and off throughout the day. I never do that with WeatherWool. When I have my WeatherWool coat on, I very rarely have to adjust for heat. It just adjusts for me. So this ice has been, or this water has been here for not even 20 minutes. I already got ice forming, just to give you an idea how cold it is out here. WeatherWool is designed for the harshest conditions and the toughest labor. I have put my WeatherWool through incredible amounts of physical stress and labor, throwing logs over my shoulders. I'm constantly camping it. I'm constantly around the fire, and it does not show sign of wear. A little bit of wear, but I mean, that's 6 years in, but it does not compromise in comfort or in effectiveness. It naturally is going to start to rub away at, if you put enough friction on something over time, it will. And I honestly don't mind that. It just starts to look like it's mine and looks like it's warm, but it's taking many, many years to start to give that wool any sign of wear. It really holds up incredibly well, and considering how soft and comfortable it is. I can't think of any other product in the market that can feel like pajamas and wear like a heavy wax canvas. I mean, it's tough stuff. We want to be really clear that there's absolutely no cotton in WeatherWool. WeatherWool is 100% wool. And a lot of other companies will make a claim that their products are 100% virgin wool, but yet it's not 100% wool. The wool in their garment is 100% virgin, but it might only be 60 or 40% wool. And so we really make an effort to make sure that our wool garments are 100% wool and that there's not going to be any weak points in these garments. And sure, making blended fabrics is going to be cheaper, and it might be easier, and there might be different ways to make garments with a wool blend. And making 100% wool garments is difficult and more expensive to produce, and so that does make the price tag of WeatherWool go up. But we are not trying to make a product at a price point, and I say we, I'm really just here for marketing. Ralph and his family are the ones standing behind this and been working on it for 13 years now. And they've been committed to just making the best wool garment possible, and once it's all said and done, figuring out what the price needs to be. There has been no compromise and no cutting corners at any way through their process. And now they're at that stage where they're just nitpicking at the smallest little details. What if we do this? What if we try this? And they're constantly still trying to push an experiment. But I'm pretty confident that they're at a point now where we'll never say never, but I don't know how it can get any better. In conclusion, let's talk about a few of the things that I've learned from my submersion tests. One of them is that I never have to pack a second shirt on a camping trip ever again. If I can fully submerge my shirt in a river and continue to wear it that day in freezing temperatures, there's really no reason for me to have a backup shirt on any camping trip when I need to consider packing light. In fact, the shirt that I wore in my submersion test number 1, when I got home, I had realized that just due to the cold temperatures, my fingertips were cracking, and I was trying to get some polysporin on them and fix them up. And an hour after being home, I realized I was still wearing the shirt that I dunked myself in the river with, and it was a little damp along the bottom, but I didn't even notice it. It was still comfortable. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm got my laptop out, and I realized I'm still in the same shirt I just was in the river with. So that's incredible. And then 2 days later, I'm wearing it to an office environment. It still looked great. It wasn't like it had any deformation because of the punishment that I had put it through. It was still a great shirt that I could wear to the office. So really impressed with it in that sense. I think that's pretty much it. We're going to be doing more of these videos, I think. Hopefully you guys like them. Click the like button to let us know that you watched it and you enjoyed it. Please write a comment so that we know people are watching and enjoying this. And if you have any questions about WeatherWool, put those in the comments. If you have any ideas for videos you'd like to see us make, throw those in there too. I'm going to be heading over to New Jersey to spend some time with Ralph and hopefully get him on camera and take you guys on some tours into the factories and the mills and just bring you as much information as we can about WeatherWool. The whole idea with this company is we want to be as transparent as possible, and it is just an honest to goodness, good family business. So, maybe we don't have the fancy marketing that some of these other companies do, but we're pretty confident that when you get this stuff on your back, you're never going to look back. You're going to be a WeatherWool fan for life. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. All right, so I am going to go in the river again because I forgot to shoot a thumbnail, and that's important. In the spirit of fear of going in and then survival when I got out, I just didn't think to take a picture. But I got the king of thumbnails here.
How do you forget? You gotta go back in for it. That sucks.
So the next one's going to be WeatherWool and fire, so stay tuned for that one. We're going to talk about why WeatherWool doesn't burn. Oh man, do I have to test that one too? This is going to get dangerous.